All of us have difficulty being as effective as we like in teaching the Baha'i Faith to others. We pray that we will have the opportunity, as Abdu'l-Baha has said so often, to find waiting servants. Teaching is an obligation in the Baha'i Faith. When we recognize our obligation to teach, each of us has this obligation. Nonetheless, it is often difficult for us to find the way to put this obligation into practice, into action. We desire very much to have the opportunity, the priceless opportunity and the most fulfilling reward of being able to find another soul who can recognize the truth of Baha'u'llah's mission in this day. It seems to me that as Baha'is, we need to be a bit more creative in creating and finding and recognizing the doors to teaching opportunities. Too often we fall into stereotyping when and where we can mention the Baha'i Faith and under what circumstances. As we develop our own teaching strategies, we often overlook and miss many teaching opportunities because we have not defined them as opportunities. I like to use the example of the man standing on the street corner waiting for a taxi cab. If he has been told that taxi cabs are yellow, he could miss a lot of taxi cabs that come by brown or green. Yellow is not the only color for a taxi cab. He can have every other thing correct and understand everything else about taxi cabs and how to hail them, but his quest will be unsuccessful simply because he had one small bit of information incorrect. Namely, taxi cabs don't have to be yellow. In the same way, I think as Baha'is, we miss many doors to teaching opportunities simply because we have never thought systematically about how our life contains teaching opportunities, how we really have the opportunity to bring the Baha'i Faith to people, casually, in pre-planned ways, or in very serendipitous and unexpected ways. Our whole lives are energized by teaching the cause of God and bringing the love of God and the light of God through the teachings of Baha'u'llah to our fellow men. We deprive ourselves of this bounty when we are unable to see many of the teaching opportunities that surround us. Of course, the first great teaching opportunity we have is the power of our own example. So many times in our writings we find statements that tell us that it is so important that we set the example for others, showing them what the light of Baha'u'llah can do in our lives. In this dynamic force of example is the opportunity to allow the light of a good character to surpass the light of the sun. The opportunity for us to show in a world that does not care that we are willing and able to serve our fellow men. In these opportunities, to express the life of the servant of Baha'u'llah are the most powerful teaching opportunities we can have. But we are all imperfect. Many times our life does not reflect the powerful example we would like it to. Though it must be a lifetime task to increase the power of our example, that is, of course, not the only way that we can serve the Baha'i Faith. But our reputation of fair-mindedness, reflecting the various attributes of the Baha'i Faith, will lead people to ask us why we act the way we do, and why, hopefully, our conduct stands out from the conduct of others. It will become an obvious and positive opportunity to say, we act this way because we are Baha'is. Remember in the Advent of Divine Justice, where Shoghi Effendi says that as Baha'is, our character and conduct must be so exemplary that people will know immediately that we are Baha'is because of the way we act. This goes back to the power of example and the power of reputation. We will never be successful enough to have this potential teaching opportunity reflected to its full extent because we are all imperfect. Often our conduct will not reflect in as full a way as we like, the teachings of Baha'u'llah. This is why it is so vital that our teaching opportunities are shaped by the integrity of our faith. It gives so much meaning to our life struggle as Baha'is to reflect the attributes of God, the teachings of our faith, so that we may become a magnet to others. Otherwise, many of the doors to teaching opportunities will be locked due to our unwisdom or the fact that we are only imperfectly able either to understand or reflect the power of our faith. A second door to teaching opportunity that we have is our contact with what I would call our circles. These circles are, in essence, the people we come in contact with regularly. Each of us has our own circle of friends and acquaintances and colleagues. We must begin to see how these circles contain important teaching opportunities. In general, we should be alert to the opportunity to bring the light of Baha'u'llah to everyone that we meet, doing so, of course, with discretion. We must never be reluctant to identify ourselves as Baha'is or to share with others the beauty and love, grandeur, and glory of our faith. But we cannot force it on them in any way or allow them to feel that our activities are at all related to proselytization. The offering of the teachings of Baha'u'llah to our fellow men must be an offering of love. It must be done in the proper spirit of humility, with the proper respect for the other individual's right as a human being to exercise his rational power of choice, to find for himself the love of God and not have it imposed by others. But at the same time, it must be direct, as comprehensive as possible, and it must be loving. We must be sensitive to the needs of the person we are teaching, to his or her orientation and preferences, and not start with a problem a person is likely to have because of their beliefs or habits or practices. We must teach in the most loving and positive way so that a person can discover the light of truth before having to rationalize it and make it fit in terms of his total life pattern that is likely to be strange to the law of God. We have to remember, as Baha'is, we are accountable for our behavior in terms of the teachings of Baha'u'llah. Those who have not had the opportunity to see the light of the teachings of Baha'u'llah are under no such mandate, so their behavior has a completely different meaning than our own. Too often, we will make the mistake of prejudging whether a person is ready to hear about the Baha'i faith or not, according to the way in which they fit the teachings of Baha'u'llah we are responsible to follow. I would like to tell a story about myself here. When I was an undergraduate at Stanford University, I was a member of the Stanford University band. And in that band, of course, were a wide variety of individuals, about 100. If I was to judge these individuals in terms of the way in which their lifestyles were compatible with Baha'i teachings, there would be no doubt in my mind that one person would come at the very bottom of the list. A person who had chosen a lifestyle such that in almost every way you could mention, the teachings of Baha'u'llah would be opposite from the way he lived his life. I served in the band with him for 3 years, and because of his obviously incompatible lifestyle, I never mentioned the Baha'i faith to him. After I left Stanford and was pioneering for the Baha'i faith in Greece, I got a letter. Dear Dwight, I have just discovered that you were a Baha'i. And I was amazed to find out that we served in the band for 3 years together, and you never mentioned the Baha'i faith to me. I thought you would like to know that I have become a Baha'i. This was a powerful lesson to me, because I had decided that this particular individual was unreceptive to the light of Baha'u'llah's teachings and would be completely closed to them. That decision led me not to mention the Baha'i faith. How lucky he was that other Baha'is did not have the same prejudice toward him. We have to remember that oftentimes a person's behavior, a person's lifestyle is conditioned by his understanding of what is required of him, of what opportunities come to him as a result of his particular lifestyle, or perhaps he or she has never even thought about many of the things which they incorporate into their lifestyle. These are simply the influences of friends, neighbors, or circumstances, or whatever. We must make sure that whenever we teach people about the Baha'i faith, we do not judge them by our standards as Baha'is, when they, as persons who have not yet seen the light of Baha'u'llah, are not held to the same standard. Our obligation is to present them with the love and beauty of our teachings in the most positive way possible, to intrigue their interests, to give them the opportunity to learn more. Once we've done that, then it becomes their responsibility to follow up on that opportunity, and we must not press them too hard. This is important as we deal with the people in our own circles. We should be careful, because these are the people we are going to be dealing with over an extended period of time. We must not alienate them or make them resent our religious fervor. Let them know uncompromisingly, explicitly of our beliefs. Find every opportunity to share with them the implications of our belief in the laws of Baha'u'llah and how Baha'i teachings influence our decisions and actions as we share activities with them during our employment or service or whatever the circles happen to be. At the same time, let us not make them resent us as Baha'is or be threatened by our faith or allow the fact that we are Baha'is to come between us and a constructive relationship in whatever activity these circles suggest. This is a very delicate matter and a hard one to gauge correctly, but it must be our intention to share completely and openly the tenets of our faith and to seek out opportunities to elaborate and to build the beauty of the faith that guides and directs our lives, so that other people may see how the lives of all of mankind may be enriched by submission to the will of God and the recognition of His revelation through the teachings of Baha'u'llah for this age. At the same time, we must allow each individual the right of choice and the feeling that we are respecting his or her rights as an individual to make the choice to bring themselves under the influence of the most recent covenant of God, or to remain aloof from it, even though we know that in terms of the consequences of their lives, that their lives would be enriched by the opportunity to share this divine wisdom. We will be alert to every opportunity to mention our faith on a low key, but in a direct way in all of our circles. In our circles of employment, for example, it should not be too long after we arrive in a position that everyone we work with on a regular basis knows in a very direct way that we are Baha'is, but knows also that we do not impose our values on them, or that our working relationship with them will in no way be affected by how they respond to the knowledge of our faith. This is very important. Otherwise, in places of employment, people could very justifiably be upset with us for using our employment for extraneous purposes. We do not use our employment for covert agendas, for trying to convert people to the Baha'i faith. We as Baha'is, wherever we are trying to find the waiting servants, to give people the opportunity to become interested, to study the faith if they choose. We want to assist them and help them in that effort anytime we can, and to give them the integrity of that choice. If we go about it in this way, then it becomes easy for us to tell everyone with whom we work that we are Baha'is, what this means, and gives us the opportunity to point out how the Baha'i faith influences our decision-making, our values, and the way we relate to other people. Also, we can point out the reason why we do not participate in drinking parties, why we do not backbite, why we avoid situations that might compromise our principles. But at the same time, we respect the other individual and his or her right to the beliefs that he has. There are, of course, many other circles that we have other than our employment circles. There are schoolmates if we are in school. There are our colleagues in various kinds of service clubs or special interest groups. And we will often have regular recreational activities that bring us into contact with other groups of individuals. Our fellowship activities give special opportunities to join with people in sharing the joy of life, the joy of being with each other, the joy of relating to other individuals. As Baha'is, we are prepared to enter into that fellowship at a level of great integrity and loyalty. As Baha'is, we care about personal relationships more than the average person. We can be counted upon as friends to exhibit the loyalty of friendship, a loyalty which is getting scarcer and scarcer in an age where relationships are increasingly disposable. The joy of sharing often becomes a suitable bridge between the differences that individuals have between each other and a door to teaching opportunity. There are also our neighbors. All of these circles are part of the regular and continuing opportunity that we have to share the cause of Baha'u'llah in the most ordinary and ongoing way. These circles give us the opportunity of casual contact within the activity or the function that we are engaging in. It also gives us the opportunity to build friendships that allow us to construct other opportunities, such as inviting people to our homes for dinner or engaging in other activities where there are natural opportunities to discuss the faith. It gives us the opportunity to invite people to share Baha'i activities with us and hear with wisdom why we have an inventory of Baha'i activities available. And depending on how active our own Baha'i community is, the more diverse the activities of the community, the more likely we are to be able to find an appropriate activity with which the individual can participate and enjoy. If the Baha'i community can sponsor social events and fellowship activities, then this is a good way to simply invite people to join in an activity that allows them to learn of our faith in a non-threatening manner. This is particularly effective if we are dealing with people whose interest may have to be aroused indirectly, as they do not either think of themselves as being religious, nor do they think of themselves as actively seeking to make spiritual decisions. The context of our Baha'i community can give us many, many different kinds of opportunities to involve people that are members of our circles. A third door to teaching opportunity is to use the casual encounters that we will have in our life with people that sit next to us on a bus, train, or plane, with whom we meet in a grocery store, gas station, barber shop, or beauty parlor. These casual encounters become wonderful doors to teaching opportunity. The way we use these doors to teaching opportunities will, in many ways, relate to the way in which we have organized ourselves to be able to respond. This relates to some of the things I've said on another tape about our personal organization of knowledge. We need to be ready to respond to people in a variety of casual encounters, and if we've thought about this ahead of time, it is a lot easier to use casual encounters as doors to teaching opportunities. If we have gained the habit, for example, of being able to smile and enter into light conversation, which includes mention of the faith in ways that we have thought through to be interesting and attractive to others, this will often turn a casual encounter into a more serious teaching opportunity. We can go about our lives in such a way to make sure that these casual encounters become most useful to us in teaching. Another door to teaching opportunity I call the constructed encounter, where we go out of our way as Baha'is to put ourselves in a context where we will interact with people, whether this is in direct street teaching, where we go and walk up and down the street, or sit in a park and play a guitar, or whatever we do. Whether we drive for 2 hours to get our hair cut in the same town every 2 weeks, so as to have an opportunity to meet the inhabitants of that town on a regular and increasingly predictable basis as they get to know us, the opportunities to teach the faith will grow. We can do a lot in the way we organize our lives to construct encounters with other individuals. So many people almost entirely restrict their activities and their teaching to their immediate circles of friends and acquaintances, and as we all know, In most cases, these circles are pretty stable. After a while, we will become very discouraged because it will appear that everyone that we know has already heard about the Baha'i Faith and has either responded favorably or has indicated a lack of interest. Then we feel frustrated and thwarted in our teaching opportunities. Here is where most particularly we have to become more creative in terms of reaching out to other people and to use casual encounters that are part of our lives to construct encounters with individuals to promote opportunities for teaching. Another door to teaching opportunity is what I would call multiple encounters, the way in which we use more than one meeting with an individual or contact with an individual to say new things, to progressively unfold the aspects of our faith, or to make known in a more direct way the meaning of our life as Baha'is. If we decide, for example, that we are trying to help with an extension teaching program in the next town, and we decide to do our grocery shopping in a particular market in that town, we may decide to go at about the same time every week, and to go through the same checkout line, and each time to spend a half a minute or a minute with the checkout clerk, talking about the kinds of things that will gradually enable them to see an understanding of the teachings of Baha'u'llah. If we think ahead of time how we are going to do this, so that we are prepared to use multiple encounters in a systematic way, and we have something new and different to share with the person each time that we meet, gradually over time, this provides a rather broad perspective, and we become known as Baha'is in a positive way. Of course, this has to be done in such a way that no one feels that we are intruding on their privacy or forcing something on them. But if it is done with discretion, these multiple encounters can be used systematically to produce very, very fine results. Let us not overlook the door to teaching opportunity, the whole area of voluntarism and service, by being able to serve in a volunteer capacity in various community agencies or schools, or wherever we will be brought into new circles of friends and contacts. These will often provide association with people who are predisposed to the kind of themes that our faith gives importance to, people whose lives are organized in such a way that they want to find ways to serve others. These are often people who are ready to hear of the cause of Baha'u'llah. So our voluntarism brings opportunities for service, which become doors to teaching opportunity. Formal proclamation activities are an obvious door to teaching opportunity. Opportunities that go along with proclamation activities are, again, sometimes neglected. This one Baha'i activity usually gives the opportunity to teach in many, many ways associated with that activity. When we are planning a proclamation, it gives us an opportunity to talk to people from whom we may be hiring halls, or negotiating publicity, or arranging for refreshments, or any of the activities associated with a Baha'i proclamation. A lot of the teaching effort of a proclamation takes place not at the actual meeting itself, but in the process of organizing the meeting, or following up on the meeting afterward. It is a real mistake if we think of a Baha'i proclamation as simply being the formal gathering for an hour or two, where individuals come to hear a lecture or whatever. That often will be the least significant part of the teaching opportunities associated with the proclamation, and we must train ourselves and talk with our fellow Baha'is about how to use our Baha'i activities in a much more creative way to create new doors to teaching opportunity. Another door to teaching opportunity is what I would call multiple agendas. Many times our activities, which will not necessarily be related directly to the Baha'i faith, will provide lead-ins to Baha'i discussions. We can build on people's natural interests and predispositions in terms of certain kinds of encounters. A very obvious example of this, which has long been practiced, is the fact that we will often seek to join a special interest club that is interested in international relations or world peace or universal language or other activity that is related to our interests as Baha'is into the Baha'i teachings. We will use this as a door to teaching opportunity to find people who have predispositions to associate themselves with certain social teachings or certain beliefs or practices that we identify as Baha'is. Then we have the multiple agenda of enjoying the club or service activity for its own merit or its own opportunities, and we also seek to make that a multiple agenda with direct teaching opportunities to share with people the teachings of Baha'u'llah. Each of us will have many, many activities and opportunities to create multiple agendas and to actually use our activities in many ways. Often, in my field of education, for example, when I am sharing with other people at a professional conference or convention, either in private discussion or from the podium, the fact that I consider one of the biggest problems facing American education to be the crisis in value education, I usually then add that the reason I am so sensitive to this as an issue is because as a member of the Baha'i faith, I find that education in values and helping kids understand a value frame of reference is woefully inadequate. I use the opportunity to share the Baha'i faith with them as a result of indicating the professional interest in the way in which values are taught at school. This is just one example. There are many, many others. As an educator who is interested in the process of change and talking about the nature of change in the society and the need for change in the educational system, this can be a lead-in to talking about the need for change in our religious perspective, to talk about progressive revelation in the Baha'i faith, or to ask why the profession is influenced by beliefs and values. If this is done in a way as to inform people why I ask questions the way I do, rather than to let them interpret this as an indication on my part that they should act according to my value position, then it works. Sometimes we make the mistake of letting people think that because we find certain kinds of satisfaction for our service and professional activities to be in the teachings of Baha'u'llah, that we are expecting other people to do that too, or we will not respect their right to have their values guide their professional development in the same way. In other words, if we can find a way as Baha'is to make sure that as a matter of courtesy and integrity, to help people understand why we act the way we do, if they are going to be relating to us regularly, we tell them what our value system is so they can better understand how to react to us. We tell them why we do the things we do and why we go about them in the way we go about them, and at the same time, we try to learn why they go about things the way they do and what their value system is. If you will, to have an exchange of value systems, to give each other a perspective that will allow closer cooperation and a more predictable relationship. This is the objective of multiple agendas. It allows us to genuinely learn how to work or play together, to serve together in a more predictable and honest relationship, at the same time that it gives us the opportunity to construct and share our Baha'i beliefs with people who may catch fire with the love of Baha'u'llah. Another often overlooked door to teaching opportunity is cooperation. Different people are good at different things, and teaching other people, bringing the cause of God to other people, often is best accomplished through a combination of talents. One person is good at inviting people to things. Another person is an excellent hostess, but not very good at getting people to come to his or her meetings. Another person is artistically inclined and makes beautiful posters or invitations. Other people have excellent contacts with businesses and organizations that can either provide services for Baha'i functions or help generate locations or publicity or whatever. Even in our personal teaching, it is obvious, of course, that in community activities, this cooperation is often a natural part of the activity. Less often do we think of this cooperation as being desirable and, in some instances, essential. 2 or 3 people can join together to mutually exploit each other's talents, to make all of their teaching activities more effective. This can be done as a total community. This can be done among a few individual friends. There are lots of ways to gain this level of cooperation in teaching activities. I can have a personal fireside knowing that I am better at speaking at that fireside than getting people to come. So I invite 2 or 3 of my Baha'i friends to invite their friends and get their friends to come to my fireside. Or it can be the other way around. I can have friends that I think would benefit from hearing about the Baha'i faith from the perspective of a certain individual, and can arrange encounters with that individual and opportunities for them to share the Baha'i faith as a result of my getting them together. There are many, many ways in which our teaching opportunities are enhanced with the combination of talents and interests that we all so richly share in their divergence. Another door to teaching opportunity is what I call personal campaigns. Sometimes this is just a personal resolve that we are not going to let the day go by without finding some new person to mention the cause of God to, or sometimes this will be a teaching and deepening campaign where we will try to learn something new every day from the Scriptures, and then find someone to share that with, either a Baha'i or non-Baha'i, or both, or whatever. We ought to develop these personal campaigns. Sometimes they can be very simple. Sometimes they can be elaborate. But the idea of setting the personal goals and objectives, and this has been talked about many times before, but too often times I feel that the idea of setting personal goals seems to be elaborate. And in the devotion to set up these elaborate goals, a lot of opportunities are missed. I think that personal campaigns ought to be sometimes viewed as very temporary and sometimes very spontaneous, sometimes very organized. There are lots of different ways in which personal campaigns can be doors to teaching. Then, of course, there are community campaigns, where we as individuals can take the opportunity to enhance our personal teaching as a part of our participation in community campaigns. It gets us out into new settings and puts us into different opportunities in terms of meeting people or sharing with others. Often we can have a personal goal that at every community gathering we will make sure that we speak to everyone who is present, or every non-Baha'i who is present, or to do everything that we can to make sure that for every community campaign we will find a seeker to come and participate in that campaign. There are many, many ways that we can enhance our personal teaching opportunities and create new doors to teaching opportunities through community campaigns. I think there are 2 other doors I would like to mention. One is what I would call the explanation. Again, this is an opportunity that can be used in a variety of settings. When we are with other people, explanations will either be sought or required as to why we are doing something, or how we are going about something, or why we are there, or why we are not doing it. There are many, many different aspects of explanations that become important and appropriate. If these explanations can include a Baha'i reason, they become doors to teaching opportunities. Finally, I think that we have to be prepared for the unexpected. Life is delightful because we have to deal with the unexpected, and we have the opportunity to deal with the unexpected. In fact, we can construct our lives to have more opportunities to deal with the unexpected. Dealing with the unexpected is a really exciting door to teaching opportunity. If our lives have been immersed in the opportunity for teaching, we will have as an automatic reaction to an unexpected situation some response that will indicate to others our beliefs as Baha'is, thereby inviting them to pursue that belief. Let us review the doors to teaching opportunity that we have been discussing. The power of our example, the circles in which we find ourselves in employment and fellowship activities, our casual encounters, the encounters that we construct, voluntarism, proclamation activities, multiple agendas, cooperation, personal campaigns, explanations, and responding to the unexpected. I have been talking about doors to teaching opportunities, the way in which we find and create and focus on opportunities to share the faith. This, of course, must be combined with the way we organize our knowledge to take advantage of these opportunities, and the way in which we deepen ourselves so that we will have more to say and share. All of these things go together. We have to have the opportunity to meet people and create the opportunity to meet people. We then have to have thought carefully about what we are going to say and how we are going to organize the opportunity and how we are going to respond to different opportunities. And finally, we have to ensure that our own personal deepening gives us the substance with which to share our Baha'i perspective and to be able to enrich those with whom we come in contact with the broadest possible knowledge of our faith. If we can always be increasing our knowledge, we will always be better prepared. If we have taken advantage of the opportunities to deepen our understanding and made that a part of our daily life, we will be better prepared to take advantage of the doors to teaching opportunity. It all goes together. Our life becomes a marvelously united whole when we are constantly gaining new knowledge. We are constantly organizing that knowledge so as to be prepared to share it. We are constantly finding new opportunities to meet people and to give them the opportunity to find the light of Baha'u'llah. When we make our experiences as Baha'is more focused on the purpose of our identity, the purpose of our life to know and to worship God, when we recognize that purpose, the doors to teaching opportunity will become a lot more obvious. We have to create teaching opportunity. We have to take advantage of teaching opportunities which are there, but which we have not recognized. We have to be prepared to use these opportunities more fully as we expand our knowledge, as our own character and reputation increasingly reflects Baha'i attributes. As we have thought through the way in which to talk about our faith and to explain it, and as we find new ways to respond, as Shoghi Effendi has often said, try something. If it works, continue it. If it doesn't, try something different until you find something that works. Each of us will be comfortable in different settings, sharing the faith in different ways. We will use different organizations of knowledge. In being prepared with our response, we will try different things. We will try different patterns of deepening until we find the way that is comfortable for us and allows us to add to the knowledge of our faith. If we do all of these things, the door to teaching opportunity will open, and we will have the bounty and joy of being able to share our faith with many, many people under many different settings and conditions. It is an exciting challenge, really, and one too often that gets us down a little bit, because if we have, in our enthusiasm as Baha'is, developed sort of standardized responses and standardized circumstances that we recognize as teaching opportunities, we can become very discouraged when the kinds of taxi cabs that we were expecting, the yellow taxi cabs, are in short supply, and we are not alert to seeing the brown ones. It is this alertness, this sensitivity, that I have tried to share with you and to encourage you to seek for yourself. The doors to teaching opportunity are there. There are many others, of course, that I have not mentioned. Each of us has to make our own inventory, create our own doors, go about it in a way that is comfortable for us. There is no one way to teach our faith, but we are well advised to remember the quotation in the Advent of Divine Justice. Be unrestrained as the wind when teaching the cause of God. Now, that does not mean that we have license to be a hurricane or a tornado. We want to be the gentle breezes. One pioneer said that we seek to be the invisible wind in the sails, to guide the ships in the right direction and provide them with energy, but in an inobtrusive and constructive way. This is the best we can hope for, to recognize the doors to teaching opportunity when they are there, and to use them as well as we can, to always go about our lives in such a way that our lives become more sensitive to the needs of others, into the opportunities to share the most precious gift, the bounty of the love of God that has been expressed in this age to bring mankind to maturity, to establish the kingdom of God on earth. What a precious gift it is to share. And this is ultimately the reason that we as Baha'is choose to seek out the doors to teaching opportunity, to open these doors and to usher those whom we meet to the knowledge of God. We are told by both Baha'u'llah and Abdul-Baha that it is most important to deepen daily, to study the Word of God, to become enlightened so that we may better understand and serve the cause of God. This is something that every Baha'i would like to make a part of his or her life. But it is something in the nature of things that we never get around to it. It doesn't have anything to do with the lack of our faith or our sincerity. It has to do with the frantic and frenetic nature of the civilization around us. We easily get preoccupied with things. It also has to do with the fact that, too often, we make our personal deepening a matter of too much devotion. That really, in our eagerness to be firm and devout, we overlook the opportunity to fulfill this vital obligation in ways that could refresh us and be the source of much comfort and enlightenment. I would like to talk about some of the ways in which we might go about deepening so that it would become easier for us, more natural for us, to deepen on a regular basis. We need to find ways to overcome the natural inertia in which we find ourselves in this society, to develop the right kind of spiritual habits which will support and deepen our commitments to Baha'u'llah. I would like to start by suggesting that what we need are small bits of deepening at convenient times. We have great intentions of deepening ourselves by doing the Igan. I have heard Baha'is talk about doing the Igan. Baha'u'llah tells us that the Scriptures have 7 meanings, nay 70 meanings, nay 70 times 7 meanings. We need to find ways to study the important teachings of Baha'u'llah and his important revelations and tablets in an ongoing way. We probably don't need to wait until we can take on or tackle a whole book. We shouldn't wait. It is this inconsistency. We really want to start deepening ourselves in the cause of God. We really have to work at it to do it justice and to honor Baha'u'llah. Our intentions are good, but they come out backwards because our good intentions get in our way. If we can break things down into small enough bits so that every time of our life becomes a convenient time to deepen, we would be much more likely to achieve the goal of regular deepening in the Holy Word. By small bits, I mean a sentence or two, or a small paragraph. There are too many days in which we just don't have a half hour or an hour to sit down quietly and meditate. Every single one of us could so organize our day so that we could take time out to contemplate a sentence or two when we wake up in the morning or when we go to bed. Some people function better in the morning, others at night. This could become a spiritual habit if we fit it into our daily routine. We can make that marvelous inspiration that Baha'u'llah has provided for us more a part of our lives. These small bits will add up in marvelous, marvelous ways. I travel quite a bit on an airplane. An airplane ride is not conducive to very long, intensive reading and study, at least not for me. If I have a Baha'i book along, I can just take it out and spend a few minutes. Sometimes I find myself immersing myself for a long period of time, but more often just a few minutes to consider 1 or 2 paragraphs, sometimes in a systematic way, sometimes opening the book at random. The important thing to do is to recognize that our study does not necessarily have to be systematic. Requiring of ourselves that our study be systematic sometimes gets in the way rather than to enhance the opportunity for our deepening. Whether it is a casual opening of a book to a particular place that intrigues you, to contemplate some passage or scripture to raise your level of understanding, or to make a very systematic commitment to intensive study, any of these provide ways to deepen with small bits at convenient times. Another part of it, however, is to make sure that over a period of time, the deepening has some breadth and takes on some diversity. One of the reasons Baha'u'llah encourages such daily study is so that our depth and breadth of understanding may both be increased. It is almost guaranteed if we really deepen daily, we will find the joy and bounty of finding new little gems to enhance the knowledge of our faith. This changes our whole orientation to the knowledge of God that we find in the Baha'i faith. The truth of the matter is that God never asks of us something which isn't in our own best interest. Often we treat the laws as something of a burden. Intellectually, we know that Baha'u'llah has told us that the spiritual laws of God are the only laws that have the potential to bring success and tranquility to our lives. We know that intellectually at a very intense and personal level. But much of what we do as Baha'is is done out of a sense of duty rather than a sense of joy or genuine commitment and understanding. That's a protection for us, because our faith allows us to gain the benefit of things we don't understand and will help compensate some of our difficulty and lack of understanding. But it is important that we strive to make the Baha'i faith more the center of our life's activity. We will find more and more that we can really rely on the word of Baha'u'llah. We are not immersing ourselves in the study of our faith for a safeguard. We are immersing ourselves in the knowledge of His Word for the love of God. That is the only motivation that makes any sense, to study our faith so that we may become enlightened, so that our knowledge and devotion and love of God can be enhanced. If we find a way to do that, our lives become easier on all sorts of dimensions. We will find support, wisdom, and guidance in many, many more things that we do. The first door to deepening that I am suggesting is to take on a small task, not a large one. Make it so easy that it becomes a spiritual habit to have at our elbow at different times of the day and in different places some book, pamphlet, or study guide, whatever can be the source of our small bits of knowledge and study. The times that we might undertake this study are delightfully varied. Sometimes people are surprised by the fact that when they really take inventory of their time, there are many convenient times during the day to deepen. Before and after meals, after you get home from school, before you sit down to watch your favorite television show. A Baha'i book can be on the table next to your favorite chair. Take a minute or two. Something like this can be joyful and can give feeling of wonderment if it is easy and brief, not as something we take on as a duty or burden. On occasion, we will all find that we are getting carried away by our study, and a brief moment will become a lot longer. But let that happen, if it happens, as it happens. Let our life be characterized by the feeling that our study time is less time than we like, and that we wish we had more, rather than feeling that deepening is something which oppresses us, that we have to do this as Baha'is in order to be good Baha'is. Just that one door, just the idea of being able to digest small bits of the writings at convenient times, is a long way toward deepening. It will not take long for us to find a tremendous ocean of knowledge out there, more than we had ever understood before we got into such a habit. Very frankly, Baha'is with the best intentions in the world cause our faith to become one long string of boring meetings. That string of meetings is often not enough to sustain us and give us this sense of awe and wonderment that this powerful revelation of Baha'u'llah can provide. I recommend that our deepening include commentaries like the Revelation of Baha'u'llah. Mr. Taherazadeh quotes frequently from the writings of Baha'u'llah in these works, and we get the double benefit of the pure Word of God and an enlightened commentary on it, which helps provide us with a historical context giving us a bit of perspective on how Baha'u'llah was responding to the religious traditions of his time. What seems ordinary to us was really miraculous in terms of the way it came into being, given all the tragedies Baha'u'llah had to face. His sufferings on behalf of mankind are truly a marvelous, indeed miraculous story. Let us remember that Baha'u'llah said the miracle of his revelation is found in the words that he has brought us, not in the circumstances of his life. The fact that the circumstances of his life were God-ordained is inescapable to anyone who studies the life of Baha'u'llah, even superficially. But the miracle of Baha'u'llah is the miracle of the divine word, which will make the difference between our spiritual life and our spiritual death, as we find ways to incorporate an understanding of the miracles into our ongoing life space. I suggest memorization as a second door of deepening. We find this recommendation in our teachings. We need to find a way to incorporate this into our daily life. I am told that one of the first things that Hand of the Cause Zikrullah Qadem ever memorized was the whole Kitab-i-Igan, in its original, of course. Very few of us are ready to memorize the Kitab-i-Igan. I, for one, admit that I'm not ready for that. But the truth of the matter is that every Baha'i memorizes things that we do not even recognize. We all memorize one very important prayer, and we recite it regularly. Allahu Abha. This is a prayer, an exhortation to God. So we need not think of memorization as a long, hard thing. Let us find favorite lines and memorize them. Many Baha'i children are taught the very brief prayer, "Greater is God than every great one." Later they may learn that this is an excerpt from the long obligatory prayer. As Baha'is, we are privileged to excerpt our prayers. We do not have to memorize the whole thing. One of the interesting facts to note is that some of the prayers in our books are really excerpts of longer prayers. Sometimes the prayers have been brought together from multiple sources. Perhaps the best example is the Tablet of Visitation, which is said at the shrine of Baha'u'llah, and was compiled from Baha'u'llah's revelation from different sources by Nabil after Baha'u'llah's death. The Tablet of Visitation, as we know it, is not a single revelation of Baha'u'llah, but excerpts put together. We are encouraged to memorize brief lines from Baha'u'llah's writings. I particularly enjoyed memorizing the inscriptions over the doors of the Baha'i Temple in Wilmette. When we are teaching, we are encouraged to quote the Word of God. We do not always have a book handy, and it's nice to have brief lines committed to memory so that we can quote them to others. Sometimes we will be paraphrasing, and sometimes our memory will play tricks on us, but it's a good thing to start. In the West, we have not taken advantage of the opportunity to memorize the Word of God. Abdul-Baha has powerful things to say about the positive consequences of memorization. In the future, no doubt, one of the activities which we will see practiced to a much greater extent will be extensive memorization of the writings of Baha'u'llah, Abdul-Baha, and the Bab. This will be one way that we will bring ourselves much more in line with the spirit of our teaching, to bring them constantly to our lips. Set as a personal objective the memorization of a few brief lines each week or each month, we will find that they mount up in really wonderful ways. Often we will find that one line may be a very nice building block to many ideas and understandings. We find in our prayer book the line, "O thou who art the most manifest of the manifest and the most hidden of the hidden." That is such a wonderful starting point to think about so many aspects of our faith. The way in which God speaks to man, and the way in which God must remain hidden. The way in which God chooses to manifest himself and help man gain spirituality. That one line is the starting point of many mental excursions in trying to understand the most manifest of the manifest. Baha'u'llah brought us over 100 volumes elaborating the most hidden of the hidden. The worlds of God are so remote and so hidden. At one point, Baha'u'llah refers to all the realms of God. In one tablet he mentions 4 kingdoms of God. The most advanced, the highest kingdom of God, is so exalted and so remote that even a manifestation of God has no comprehension or understanding of it. If we could have some small notion of the vastness of God's dominion, to internalize that even a manifestation of God who can speak with the authority of God has no comprehension of some of these realms, it would help us, I think, put our faith in perspective. This has been one of my favorite concepts to memorize and focus attention on. A third door to deepening is specialization. I think that as Baha'is we tend to be very, very superficial. We tend to recycle the same things again and again and again. We get a bit of knowledge, and boy, do we get a lot of mileage out of it. I wish I had a nickel for every Baha'i fireside I have attended that started with, the Bab declared himself in 1844 and he was martyred in 1850, Baha'u'llah declared himself, and on we go, with a kind of thumbnail sketch that represents a superficial statement of the history of our faith and its teachings. We endlessly bore ourselves with this. How is it possible to look forward to going to meeting after meeting, and particularly fireside after fireside, when we hear the same things that we have been hearing for the whole time that we've been Baha'is? I think we owe ourselves more. And we can find more through the door of specialization. Each of us can find a few things that we'd like to know and understand more about. The marvelous compilations that the Universal House of Justice has issued are one very nice source of specialization. A Baha'i who is interested in music might start the intensive study of the compilation on music. We might want to become experts in the process of mass teaching, or experts on the Baha'i front. There are experts on the ethical teachings of Baha'u'llah. We could try to understand the hidden words on a much deeper and more personal level. This level of specialization can be a matter of brief inquiry or casual attention, or it can become something which extends over a long period of time. It can even produce volumes. Alan Ward's book on the travels of Abdu'l-Baha in the United States represents a specialization which was undertaken over a period of years. At the moment, a group of people are working with me looking at Abdu'l-Baha's use of analogies. We are trying to compile the analogies of Abdu'l-Baha, what the subjects of these analogies were, and how they were used by Abdu'l-Baha. We might find better ways to use them and incorporate them into our teaching. There is no limit and no end to the kinds of specialization that we can undertake. But as we undertake this specialization, we become much more interesting to our fellow Baha'is. The introduction to the Baha'i faith can call attention to an area of special study as easily as it can to some sort of comprehensive overview. It is very good for people to have a comprehensive overview. It is equally good for them to understand some small aspect of our faith in greater depth, even as a starting point for their knowledge of the cause of God. There is no one place to begin the study of the Baha'i faith. It can begin anywhere. And if as Baha'is each of us becomes specialized in some aspect of the study of our faith, it makes it possible for us to enlighten each other even in our casual firesides, to make all of our meetings more exciting and more productive, so that we simply do not bore each other again and again and again. Specialization increases the knowledge of the person who is undertaking the study, and specialization broadens the knowledge of the community as a whole. It means that we are more likely to learn something new every time that we gather to study our faith. Every feast can have a presentation on some area of study that one of the members of the community has undertaken. This can be a regular thing which helps broaden our base of knowledge and understanding. If within a community each person undertakes a different kind of specialization, we become resources for each other. When a person who is interested in studying the Baha'i faith comes along with a particular kind of interest, we will know someone to whom we can refer them to carry on a dialogue, to get their questions answered. Specialization is an important door to deepening. each of us can find some intriguing notion to follow up on, to study in depth. Some years ago, as a part of undertaking a systematic development of the Star Study program, some members of our committee became intrigued with the names of God. Before we were finished, we had compiled a list of 400 or 500 names of God. What a wonderful little sidelight that was on our overall deepening program, just to see that in one place, gathered together, a large number of the names of God, and to contemplate and talk about the vastness of understanding to be gained by trying to deepen ourselves on the meanings of names and attributes of God. We cannot know God, but we can know the attributes of God. To specialize in the knowledge of the attributes of God is something that is both delightful and profound. Another door to deepening is what I would call mutual study. We can gain a lot by working with each other and bouncing our ideas off of other people. We all have people who share our perspective, with whom we feel intellectually and personally compatible. To undertake mutual study with such individuals is almost always a benefit to both, to test our interpretations. Baha'u'llah encourages us to interpret his teachings. The difference between our personal interpretation and that of Abdul-Baha and Shoghi Effendi is that our personal interpretation is binding on no one. It represents our own understanding, and it is useful to us simply because it is our understanding. And we are not prohibited from sharing our understanding with others, but we are prohibited from forcing our understanding on anyone else. We share our understanding with others, and we invite them to consider it. If they find it compatible, they may choose to incorporate it into their understanding. If not, they are free to ignore it. The process of mutual interpretation and sharing is a very personal process. It is a part of the intellectual gifts that God has given us to try to tease out new meanings from our intellectual efforts. This creates bridges and links between various isolated aspects of our knowledge, helping us to understand how different concepts relate and support each other. That process can be very much enhanced by mutual study. Mutual study can either be in person, when we get together to have discussions, or by correspondence. There may be people who we know who have certain kinds of perceptions that have been very helpful to us. When they say, "This is something I have been thinking about, what is your perspective? How do you think I could understand this better?" Our understanding develops and our horizons are stretched. If we as Baha'is make it a much more natural part of our spiritual life to question each other and to support each other in our study of our faith, our knowledge, awareness, and spiritual depth will grow enormously. There are so many opportunities for mutual study that we pass up simply because we are not alert to our potential support systems. Incidentally, that kind of mutual study, the kind of deepening class with 2 or 3 people who get together because they enjoy each other's company and enjoy each other's perspective, can turn out to be some of the most exciting and the most challenging deepening activities we can imagine. We tend to make deepening classes very formal, very formidable, and often very boring. I know of nothing in the law of Baha'u'llah that says we should bore each other in our deepening activities. That is not one of the doors of deepening that I know about. Yet we somehow too often seem to ritualize the approach that if we study, we have to make it boring. Deepening takes on this awesome sense of overpowering duty instead of the joy we discover when we are able to find new spiritual refreshment with every turn of the page. Another door to deepening is finding multiple meanings. This goes back to the quotation that I mentioned earlier, in which Baha'u'llah said that all the words of God have 70 meanings, nay, 70 times 7 meanings. The idea is there, inescapably, that the Word of God can be understood at so many different levels. It is a wonderful thing to try and tease out these multiple meanings. One of the things that I do is this. I will recite a prayer that I know very, very well to see if I can add another level of meaning to those I have already digested. It does not necessarily mean that all the ideas that we can come up with are true and valid, because we may mislead ourselves, but we will also be able to discover and enlighten each other about many potential areas of meaning that are contained in the Scriptures. It becomes so much more exciting for us to see the potential of the Word of God if we realize that there are many, many levels of meanings and understanding that can be incorporated into a single word or phrase, and exciting for us to know that we can discover several of these meanings. Sometimes undertaking the study of multiple meanings means pulling out the dictionary and encyclopedias and taking apart each sentence word by word to try to understand why things are said the way they are. So many times when we are saying prayers, we just read right by things and never focus on them. It's a wonderful thing to sit down and dissect them. I can remember one time in which our community spent about 3 days on 2 or 3 pages of the Tablet of the True Seeker. The Tablet of the True Seeker makes a marvelous study class for as long as you want to study it. There are so many meanings packed into each phrase and each sentence. What does Baha'u'llah mean by veils of acquired knowledge? How can acquired knowledge become a veil? Think about that for a long time and understand the different meanings and levels of meaning about veils of acquired knowledge. We could also play games with multiple meanings. I know one community that would take something which would be very familiar, like the remover of difficulties, and invite all the members of the community to try and come up with their own understanding of a particular phrase of the remover of difficulties, a prayer that we constantly say as Baha'is. What does it mean when the Bab says, "And all abide by his bidding"? There are different levels and different ways to understand it. Can we share with each other different meanings and expose for ourselves the level of richness that is there? Now, I think that it's important to note that sometimes we are not very creative, and maybe the different levels of meanings will not be immediately obvious to us. We should not become discouraged if that's the case. If we only see 1 or 2 meanings, or maybe none at all, so be it. It will come at another time or in another way, but it is important to know that the meanings are there. One of the ways that we can help our understanding of the richness of the Word of God is to find the multiple meanings, at least in some of the passages. As we start to get some personal experience with the way in which the words of God can be understood at a variety of levels, this process becomes a significant door to deepening. Another door to deepening is the use of nuggets and gems. Each of us in the course of our study will come across a small little phrase, small stories, particularly in the tablets of Abdul-Baha, that will have tremendous impact on us. We need to find the opportunity to share these nuggets and gems that we discover hidden in the writings of our faith with each other, to mention them in feasts or on special occasions, as preludes to firesides or in our correspondence with each other, to say, "This is something that I recently found that just gave me a level of understanding I had never had before." I mentioned a little earlier the fact that Baha'u'llah had referred to the kingdoms of God as paralleling the kingdoms of man. This is something I encountered recently. This was a gem, to find Baha'u'llah saying that in the kingdoms of God there are some levels, some states that even the manifestation of God can't comprehend. Now that was a little gem, a little nugget that I spent a lot of time thinking about. The importance of knowing that the kingdoms of God are so vast that even the manifestations of God cannot comprehend all the kingdoms of God. That just set my mind buzzing in lots of ways. Then there was another little nugget I can share with you that made an impact on me recently. In the Revelation of Baha'u'llah, at one point the author talks about how Baha'u'llah mentions that all the manifestations of God are equal. They are all unified. At the same time, Baha'u'llah tells us how this revelation is greater than any revelation in the past. There is a quotation from Baha'u'llah in which he says that this revelation is so great that the earlier manifestations really had no understanding of its greatness at all. Well now, if the manifestations of God are all united and equal, how could these manifestations of God not understand the greatness of Baha'u'llah? The concept that set me thinking was the use of the analogy of the child. The child, the youth, and the adult are all the same person. In spite of the fact that they are the same person, they are different. In one sense, the child dies as the youth emerges, and the understanding and capabilities of the mature adult are very different from the child. The child has neither the physical nor the emotional prowess of an adult, although it is the same person or identity. In the same way, the manifestations of God come into more primitive society. The station of these manifestations are exactly the same, all united, but the development of the station of the manifestation was much more primitive. These manifestations of God all had the potential of the fullness of all revelation, yet that potential remained undeveloped. This was a nugget for me, but maybe not as interesting to someone else. Or let's put it this way. It is more likely that some people will be at a stage or a point in their lives at which this is something that they would like to focus on. Another person would not wish to focus on this or find it exciting or interesting. In some instances, we can even be threatened by certain kinds of concepts we find. We have to set them aside and leave them be, but the idea of being able to pick out certain little bits and pieces of the revelation of God and focus on and highlight them is a very exciting thing. We can make the study of our faith much more alive. It ensures that we are always attaining new levels of understanding or being exposed to new concepts we had not thought of before. We should really strive in our lives as Baha'is to learn something new every day. We should strive to make our Baha'i gathering such that every single person in that gathering will learn something new at that time. Part of the opportunity to learn something new will rest with the cleverness, integrity, and care with which those meetings and gatherings are instructed. And part of our opportunity to learn from each meeting will be our own mindset as we listen for the multiple meanings that can be found in all the teachings of Baha'u'llah. These vignettes and gems are an important door to deepening because they help us focus on small aspects of our faith which we can then salt away in our own repertoire. Another door to deepening is very straightforward questions and answers. We ask questions and we get others to help us with the answers, or we go find the answers in the writings. Other people ask us questions and we start scurrying around to find the answers, and in the process of trying to find the answers, either in reading the books or talking to other Baha'is, our knowledge expands. Many of the scriptures that we have represent Baha'u'llah's and Abdu'l-Baha's responses to various questions that believers raised to them. The revelation was a result of exploring this mine of inestimable wealth and depth. All in all, we have 100 years of revelation and interpretation of that revelation, and that will keep scholars of the Baha'i faith busy for about 1,000 years. We are just at the brink of being able to have access to that wealth of knowledge, but it is there. As we focus our study through the uniqueness of individual questions and answers, we can learn a lot, and the process becomes a powerful door to deepening. The uniqueness of individual questions and spending the time to find better answers to frequently asked questions is truly a door to deepening. Another door to deepening, which is really one of the most conventional aspects of deepening, as we can historically define it in our community, is the systematic study of books and tablets. This is something that will happen from time to time, and for some people it will be a constant thing. But for others, we have the urge and inclination to study an individual book, and this will occupy us for a time, and we will tire of it and become preoccupied with other things. In our own community right now, we have undertaken in our deepening classes to pick several of the collected works of Shoghi Effendi, to really try to understand the depth and breadth of Shoghi Effendi's communication to the American Baha'is and to the Baha'is of the world. We hope to see if we can identify a little more deeply with the drama and excitement of Shoghi Effendi's task of building a new world order. All of us engaged in these study classes are finding new levels of understanding as we go through Call to the Nations. And incidentally, the particular style with which we are comfortable is not to sit there and read and read and read and ask if there are any questions, but rather to try to stay a few pages ahead through reading on our own, a task that we don't always accomplish. In this way, we do not have to have any set amount of material that we have to cover in an evening, but allow ourselves the luxury of lots of intellectual side trips. Looking things up in dictionaries and encyclopedias, and in the case of Shoghi Effendi's writings, often consulting maps and letting the discussion go in whatever direction it goes. Sometimes we will find things that we will focus on that are less than one page. We can read several pages and find that someone in the group wants to focus on them in depth. Again, there is no one way to systematically study the books and tablets of our revelation. The depth and breadth of what is available to us is so vast. Another door to deepening is application and interpretation of certain of the teachings, to think of the ways in which they can be applied to different circumstances, or to take a law and see how it relates to other laws. For example, we are told as Baha'is that Baha'u'llah puts a tremendous emphasis on the family. We are told as Baha'is that the most premium activity that we can engage in is pioneering. Sometimes family responsibility and pioneering opportunities may appear to compete with each other. Different laws of Baha'u'llah apply simultaneously, and we have to learn how it becomes a distortion to focus on any one law to the exclusion of others, that life is a marvelously intricate relationship between laws and principles. The source of our understanding is the potential application and interpretation of the Baha'i laws, striving to make them a part of our life. One of the ways in which we should try to deepen ourselves is to see how many principles we can apply to the same situation. Here, we might start with an ordinary life circumstance and start brainstorming and thinking of the various Baha'i teachings that would apply to that circumstance. When we do that, we are enormously impressed with just how delightfully complicated life can be. It is such a wonderful thing to recognize the power that God has given to man in terms of choice. We do not live in a world as devout Baha'is. God has given us the ability to choose. One of those little gems I remember reading recently is that it is the justice of God that He will help us to achieve even those things which are not in accordance with spiritual principles, simply as a matter of justice. God values the choice that man has to the extent that God will help man exercise that choice even when man chooses a way that is not in accordance with his own spiritual development. It is so wonderful to think about the way in which we have the opportunity as human beings to use this God-given right to choose. The last door to deepening that I would like to mention is that of alternative perspective. Each of us brings with us a certain perspective to understanding the teachings. It is important that we recognize that it is sometimes our perspective that creates the understanding that we have. If our perspective is a Western perspective, we view certain aspects of the Baha'i marriage law as very restrictive. It is not customary in our society to gain the permission of our parents before we marry. If we have the perspective of the East, that law is not a restrictive law at all. From an Eastern perspective, how permissive Baha'i law is to insist that marriage be a free choice and not be arranged. Depending on the cultural background that we have, our individual orientation, our interests and preoccupations, every teaching of Baha'u'llah will take on different meanings. It is important for us as a community to share these different perspectives and be aware of how they will influence our understanding of our faith. Let us then review the doors to deepening that we have considered. Deepening in small doses. Memorization. Specialization. Mutual study. Multiple meanings. Nuggets and gems. Questions and answers. Systematic study. Application and interpretation. And alternative perspectives. There are so many doors to deepening. The doors to deepening I have suggested are certainly not the only way of understanding deepening. But as we share together different ways to go about deepening and organizing our deepening to increase our level of understanding of our faith, this will provide us a level of richness that we have not achieved before in our community, and will enable us to overcome many of the problems that we have as individual Baha'is in the practice of Baha'i community life. Increased ability to serve the cause of God becomes the ardent, lifelong objective of the souls of Baha'u'llah's heavenly army. Problems of superficiality, lack of perspective or understanding, problems of stultification because we sit around and bore each other repeating the same level of superficiality. All these can be overcome through the use of many doors to deepening. How much more successful our lives will become when we realize the purpose of our creation, to know and to worship God.